Welcome to Creative Culture. My name is Steve, and I scour the earth to bring the most creative people to your ears every 2 weeks. If you're interested in art and making things, this is a podcast for you. No matter what the topic, every episode is an exploration into the creative process, the creative mind, and how creative people play a pivotal role in shaping culture. If you've listened to a couple of these episodes and you find the show fun, interesting, valuable, or just plain entertaining, please consider supporting the show over at patreon.com/creativeculturepod. This podcast is a labor of love, and your help goes a long way in keeping this show sustainable while still allowing me to work at my day job. Paul Karyakos, who everyone knows as Chef PK, is a food YouTuber with a unique approach that combines culinary arts with anime. Before making videos, he worked as a professional cook and hotel chef manager for 11 years and is an author, having written a book entitled Anabites, Anime and Video Game Food, IRL, Volume 1. I think the world is anxiously awaiting Volume 2, don't you think, Paul?
I hope so. We're actually working on a second book as we have this podcast going. We're actually editing the draft today, so it's kind of exciting.
Paul's YouTube channel, Chef PK, blends his professional cooking and his love for anime and video games to create very distinctive content. Whether he's trying Liu Kang's diet from Mortal Kombat, cooking Sanji's food from One Piece, eating Chainsaw Man food for 24 hours, or trying every food at Comic-Con. Yeah. His videos are fun, lively, and entertaining. If you love food, anime, video games, and or all of the above, you need to check out Chef PK. Hey, Paul, it's great to see you again.
Thank you. Appreciate the intro. Yeah, it's been a while since we first met. That was an exciting weekend.
That was a lot of fun. We got to have dinner with you and your wife and talked about all kinds of things. And you just got back from Japan, huh?
Yeah, we did about 2 weeks ago or so, and I've literally been stuck in my office since then editing. And, like most YouTubers, we do a lot of our own editing. So luckily, I do have a little bit of help with this one. But yeah, it was an insane trip, and we filmed a ton of content.
How long were you there?
We were there for about 3 weeks. And in those 3 weeks, I believe we filmed 10 full videos. So it was quite an eye-opener for how much we could produce in a shorter amount of time. Well, you say shorter amount of time, but for us, it went far beyond what we thought we could do, which was really cool.
What were your goals when you set out for Japan?
Honestly, the initial goal was to do sort of a vlog, right? Like maybe just a casual thing where I'd bring a camera with me and we would have videos planned out. I like to have a plan when I go film. I don't necessarily need to have everything scripted, but I do like to understand what I'm getting myself into. And so a lot of the times, even if I'm doing a vlog, I have bullet points. I have things I want to do, things I need to visit, and it just makes it flow a bit better. So initially we had thought, well, let's go visit some cool restaurants that we have on our bucket list anyways. We'll record that like a daily vlog, and it'll be 4 or 5 hours long of filming, whatever the case may be. That eventually evolved into what the series is now. And episode 1 just went up not too long ago on the channel. And the new series is what we're calling Quest for the Best, where I'm trying to go around Japan, finding some of the best anime food I can find, because most food in anime is just influenced by Japanese cuisine. And so you can correlate the two. If you see, let's say, a yakisoba in an anime, you can more than likely find that in Japan, almost 1-to-1. And what we decided to do is create a series that felt more akin to Everybody or Somebody Feed Phil, which is a fantastic Netflix show. If you haven't seen it, absolutely recommend it. One of my favorite series of just a guy going around eating and enjoying food, but there are stories he tells. So the stories we tried to tell are, what were the influences behind these characters' decisions? What were these influences behind these characters' likes and dislikes? Why did the author think about making this character in this way, maybe based on their favorite food? And it usually reflects in the shows. or the manga that they're a part of. So the series now is us going around trying to find these characters from a specific show, their favorite diners, their favorite eats, their favorite dishes. We also included some of my favorite things. I don't know if we have video for this, but
Yeah.
I'm a big uh, D&D or Magic the Gathering fan, so I always have D20s. So we have elements of randomness where we have to roll D20s depending on the location, what we're going to be doing next, a little challenge involved of some kind representing the character. And we tried to make it very fun and engaging. And this series, what we have learned the most is our capacity for creativity. And it started to involve, we hired a videographer to help us. My wife was actually essentially the producer who was keeping us on track. We had people writing guides for us that I would go over and say, okay, these are where we're going, this is what we're doing here. And it almost felt like we were producing a true show you would see on Netflix, from the editing that we had help from Jetlag, and getting all of these little maps designed to show the areas that we were going into. So like, we own the maps. We're not using Google Earth or anything like
That's
that.
pretty cool. It's almost like a travel log too.
Exactly. And I commissioned artists to make us into little characters. So you see our characters go across the map, and we just try to constantly put more into it. And what it really had shown me was the lengths we can go to create video with what we have right now, because we don't have a lot. We have a couple of cameras, and we just plan this series for about 6 months. Maybe a larger team could plan this series in 60 days, right? Or maybe even 30 days. But for us, because we don't have a larger team, we just spend more time developing it. So now, with this series kind of going in full swing, we're releasing episodes weekly now, and it'll go throughout the end of the year. We're actually starting to film for next year, and I'm taking all of the things that I've learned, and now I'm putting it into my normal content, I would say. So this trip, if anything, has taught me the things I can do as a creator, which is really, really eye-opening.
I mean, that's the beauty of YouTube, really, is being able to work with limited resources and produce really good content. I'm always just blown away by some of the really polished productions I see, people who I've had on this show. And I think, wow, they've got a huge team. And they're like, nah, I'm just a guy with a camera. I've got,
Yep.
I edit them myself and everything. It's pretty amazing.
What I do appreciate is the larger content, like what we're trying to do. But I absolutely know that there is space for what I'm calling lo-fi content, or I guess 2015 YouTube content.
That was
Like,
peak YouTube, man.
yeah, like 2016 YouTube. I think it's coming back.
Is there a difference between Japanese cuisine and anime cuisine? When you go there, were you seeking out these restaurants that were preparing things specifically based on anime and manga, or just Japanese cuisine in general?
As someone who fell into love with food because of Japanese cuisine throughout culinary school, I specifically went for Japanese cuisine. But again, almost everything you see in an anime or manga is derived from Japanese culture and cuisine. The one caveat is that most of the time it's just exaggerated in the show or the comic, right?
Okay.
Maybe it's bigger, maybe it's more extravagant, maybe they did some weird technique that doesn't really work in the real world, but it looks cool. So those are the things that I would try to find, but I'm also just someone who really loves and enjoys food. So I didn't go out of my way to find too many things that were off the wall, right? If it was part of the restaurant, I would absolutely order it. In one of the videos that's actually coming up pretty quickly here, it's where we went and found a bunch of One Piece food. And One Piece is the biggest manga and anime
You've
on
got
the
a lot of
planet.
videos on One Piece.
Right. I love it. I'm still reading it. I read it every week. It's a great, great story. But I'm sorry, this is for My Hero Academia. I'm getting them confused now. For My Hero Academia, the one that released, I'll touch on the One Piece one in a minute. But we went to a soba restaurant that has amazing, not only soba, which is a very common thing out in Japan, but they also had oyakudon and katsudon. And so we ordered katsudon. Katsudon is like a fried chicken cutlet. It's usually cooked with egg and onion and usually some kind of a sauce. It's really, really delicious, put on top of rice. But they had this thing for their soba called Mount Fuji soba. And it's kind of a gimmick, but it's literally a pile of soba about, I don't know, 8 inches tall. Of course I'm going to order it because I'm already there, but I didn't go out of my way to go find it.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure that I put the food first and then kind of the gimmick second in a lot of ways. But if they had something interesting, I would order it, especially because the food was insanely cheap out there.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot to draw on. Does food play a large part of anime and manga, coming from somebody who doesn't really know a lot about this?
Usually it does. And what's interesting I have found is that the food is part of the story beats. And usually if something important has happened or is going to happen, usually food is involved. Whether or not that's a hero getting ready for something intense happening and it becomes almost a meditative session where they sit down and maybe they're just chewing on their favorite snack, their favorite bread, whatever it might be. It almost becomes that point of a low before an insane high of maybe action or whatever the case is. Or it might usually what ends up happening is food is after the insane action has happened, especially in the genre that I cover the most, which is shonen, which is essentially like a coming of age or it's like young adult kind of anime. A lot of the times when these characters are going about in, let's say they're in a huge battle, or they're one of my favorite animes of all time is actually a volleyball anime, and it's called Haikyuu. And in this one, where there's one scene in particular, so spoilers for those of you who haven't seen it, but the team is in a huge tournament and they're just going all in. They're putting everything on the court. I played a lot of sports in high school, so it resonates with me. And after the tournament and they end up actually losing, there's this moment of reprieve where their coach takes them out for Japanese barbecue. And they're all sitting down at the restaurant and their coach tells them, this isn't the end of the line. We have so much we can work on. And the team is trying to, hold themselves together because it was such an important tournament. And you see them starting to eat, and then a few of them start crying, like because they had lost. And I've been in that position. So seeing the food become almost a comfort thing in shows, it's the same in a lot of other, I guess, real life shows or whatever the case is. Food in anime acts the same as in most mediums, where I guess for most people listening who are maybe not familiar with anime, the best comparison I can give you is at the end of Avengers, of the first Avengers movie, where they have the battle for New York and they're sitting in a shawarma shop,
right,
eating shawarma.
Right.
It's the same story beat. Insane intensity, all of these sacrifices, everything happens, and then they're eating. So they do the same thing in anime, which I am drawn to.
And is that a long history of doing that in anime? Is that just like a tradition in this? And does that reflect Japan's love for their national cuisine?
I believe so. And from what I understand, granted, the oldest anime I've probably seen is maybe from the 90s. And what I understand is that food depiction in anime used to be horrible. There was this one, show where they had drawn a cabbage and they didn't even bother to draw it. It was just like a square that had like some texturing on it, right? Not even round or anything. Right. And people were like actually upset. Like, you're showcasing our nation's cuisine this way, is how it felt. You're showcasing what we love, something like katsudon, in the worst way possible. And then you're sending this out to the world. After this kind of renaissance, there are now studios that are dedicated to just drawing the food portions of anime. So like a show might hire out a studio who specializes in those scenes, because it's actually very important now, because you're showcasing culture, right? It's not just some cartoon. You're actually showcasing culture. Studio Ghibli is very well known for this, where you watch some of those food scenes and you're like, how much of their budget did they spend on this bacon flipping? My God, like their whole budget, right? I think now it's become more and more important, but also they're letting off of that. just a bit, unless it's an important scene, right? Like the
Yeah.
barbecue scene at the end of the volleyball anime, a scene where there's one in My Hero Academia where a teacher's, I'm sorry, the the teacher of one of the students is pushing himself too hard, and he brings the student a bento,
Hmm.
and the student runs away because he didn't want any sympathy, and the teacher trips over and the bento spills and you see everything fly out of it. And to me, what that actually means is all of that hard work is unappreciated by the student. And so you see these little things and you're like, wow, how much time did that teacher, maybe not a lot of people think about this like I do, but because I know how much effort goes into just making a meal,
Hmm.
animated or not, all of that effort has gone to waste, right? Like you're just
Wow.
leaving it on the floor and there's no thank you for that. Eventually, the student gets one of those bentos from the teacher because the teacher's persistent, and then he's eating it and he's having this very like reflective moment about it. So there are all of these beats that follow food in anime, and I think they're underrepresented in a lot of ways.
So the preparation of the food and that presentation is just as important to the characters there as they are in real life. It's just as much a
Absolutely.
reward for the person eating it as it is for the person preparing the food.
If you think about just having like a Thanksgiving dinner for those who celebrate, right? Or a Christmas dinner, whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. It could just be you're visiting your grandmother and she's making you dinner. I think there's more appreciation when you understand how much work went into making that.
Yeah, yeah, and it's more than just putting the ingredients together.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be some love involved in preparing those meals. Is there any a Western influence of food creeping into the? I know you mentioned bacon there. To me, that does not sound like a very Japanese
Mm-hmm.
ingredient.
Surprisingly, bacon can be found throughout a lot of places in Japan,
Okay.
but I feel like it's slightly different. It's the same where I believe in the UK, bacon is classified differently than our bacon,
Mm.
where it's maybe a different cut or it's not smoked the same way, whatever the case is. But there are a lot of Western influences in Japanese content because if I have my history correct, and I know I'll get roasted if I don't, manga was more or less created because of American comics when the occupation, I shouldn't say occupation, I think that's the wrong word, when the US started building military bases in Okinawa and they brought in comics just because comics pers- came before manga. So you do see a lot of Western influences in manga, and now you'll come across any anime that has pizza, that has burgers, right, has sandwiches, whatever the case is. And a lot of those influences do reflect in anime, especially if they have a kind of a multicultural show, right,
Mm.
where maybe there are characters from the US, maybe there are people who just enjoy pizza, because you can find a lot of Western foods in Japan. To We were just in Tokyo, and we were in Tokyo Station proper, and we came across Italy, which is homemade from scratch pastas, right? You're getting served white wine and butter sauces, and you can get clams cooked with, shallots and garlic. Like you can find a lot of those influences.
We've got a manga store here in San Francisco in Japantown, and it's two stories, and it's kind of overwhelming to me because it's just like all of those books are so brightly colored, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like it's just overwhelming how much those are. Do you follow just like certain ones, or are you kind of open to all of it? And where does a person even begin to get into manga?
I usually go off of recommendations, and whether or not it's recommendations from other YouTubers I follow or just friends, but it's very difficult to find one that you would like, just like finding a book, right? You can go to a Barnes and Noble or whatever, your local library, and just look around, and you're spoiled for choice. And so what that ends up meaning is that you pick nothing, right?
Right? Yeah,
So
it's like
you
too
just pick
much.
nothing.
Yeah.
And sometimes what I'll do is I'll go to my local Barnes and Noble just because we don't have a lot of manga shops in my area. I think that's one of the only places, Barnes and Noble, that carries any manga.
I didn't even
Uh,
know Barnes and Noble was still around.
it's yeah, and they have a massive manga selection now. They
Oh,
like the one that's closest to me actually expanded it last year because they sell so much. And what I'll do is I'll just go to a section, I'll just grab something that looks interesting and I'll read 3 or 4 chapters. And if it hooks me, I'll just buy it.
yeah.
And I don't normally buy a lot. I'll usually buy like a volume 1 because they do get expensive and they do take up a ton of space. But then I mostly read stuff online. I buy like
Oh,
it's like $2 a month to get unlimited manga for like an official app that I like nothing that's not official because I like supporting it as much as I
yeah.
can. And I'll read a couple of chapters, and if it hooks me, I'll stay. So I like the adventure aspect of I'm already walking around town. Maybe I go to a cool bookshop, grab one, read it. I buy it to support them because it's like $6 or $7, and then I'll read the rest later online.
So let's get into this YouTube business now. What was the motivation to combine the cooking
Oh,
and the anime, and how did this come together? And I guess maybe even go back a little further. What was your background with cooking?
so my background started when I was a kid, probably. Like my mom has a picture of me in the kitchen, that kind of thing, just like throwing pots and pans places. And I actually had a pretty bad relationship with food, I would say, growing up. Not that I didn't love it. It was mostly I didn't understand what food did to me. So I would eat everything. I figured out the value of $1 when you could, go to Subway and the $5 footlong was a thing, right?
I
And
remember those. I remember the
yeah,
jingle.
yeah, exactly. Five. I won't even
Dollar
sing it.
foot
Oh my
long.
god. Yeah, date ourselves. Uh, I would understand that buying a $5 sandwich, I could get everything on it, and so I would just put everything. I'm
You
like, I
might as
want
well,
every
right?
topping, right? It's $5, unlimited
Yeah.
toppings, put everything on it, and I would we would have those, or we would go get a. I grew up in San Diego, so we'd go to a taco shop and get burritos and roll tacos and just enjoyed food. This is 12 or 13 years old, and by the time I was a freshman in high school, I was about 300 pounds and
Wow.
I was just a big kid. They called me Winnie the Pooh for football because I was too nice to hit anybody, but I wouldn't move.
You
So they just
offensive
put, yeah,
lineman.
they just put me offensive line, and people just, you have these like 90-pound like linebackers running into you and they're just falling over.
It's like just
Um,
stand there, you'll be
yeah,
fine.
just stand there and you'll be good. And I didn't realize it at the time how unhealthy that was, to be that weight at that age. And I watched a lot of anime. I watched a lot of Dragon Ball Z and Cowboy Bebop and Gundam and Ninja Scroll, all these different things that had a lot to do with athleticism and fighting and, fighting for a cause or whatever it was. And I started to really take a look as I was growing up of like, oh man, I really need to change my diet and whatever. And so, as a very naive 16-year-old, when I decided to do this, my friends and I all tried to do the Atkins diet together when that was a thing, which is now kind
It's
of keto.
keto. Yeah.
It's keto, but you didn't know what it was.
Right.
And so what we would do is we'd still go to those taco shops and order a burrito and then just dump out the
Take all the
insides
stuff out of
and then
it.
throw away the tortilla. And we're like, yeah, we're healthy.
Yeah.
And we would do that, I don't know, a couple times a week. And I dropped probably close to 100 pounds in 8 or 9 months, which isn't a healthy thing to do, but it's because you're with your friends and you're doing it. And I was playing sports. And as I got older, probably 17 years old, I started to actually find a big interest in food, to how do we make these really tasty foods healthier? And that was kind of my drive for wanting to learn more about food, because I started to think we're putting all of this in our body and I want to figure out how to do it better, right? We can still indulge. I still indulge every week. I still like to go have something fun, but that's what really drove me to go to culinary school. And when I had gone to culinary school, it's like, this is where I can learn what I want to learn. Plus, I don't have to work at a desk job, which I was notorious for being terrible at. I used to work and do AutoCAD design for like electrical housing. And where I would basically make maps to tell you where plugs go And that was when I was 18 and I was losing my mind. So
What? That
yeah,
sounds fun.
it paid really well. And I learned AutoCAD 2003,
Yeah.
goated program, right? But I hated sitting at a desk. So
Uh,
this was my way of being active, learning a really good skill. But during this time, because of the culture in a kitchen, especially at the time, like 2004, 2005, I graduated high school in 05. I went to culinary school in 2005. I didn't take a summer break or anything. I just went straight to culinary school. And you didn't really want to tell people you were into the nerdy stuff at the time. So I kind of just let it, go to the wayside, or I enjoyed it, on my days off. I didn't really have friends who enjoyed it in culinary school. It wasn't a big thing. All of the friends that I had in high school enjoyed it, who I still talk to this day. So we still have that camaraderie. And
what kind
anime
of
is
things are most people in culinary school into?
into so a lot of it was interesting because it was more or less an international school. You had people of all different backgrounds, countries, everything. So people, I think, gravitated towards just the food.
Oh yeah.
And most people, would talk about, because it was so intense, you're in labs for 6 hours a day, cooking, prepping, whatever it was. Um, and so you didn't really have time to talk about hobbies. So you talked about food. And what that ended up happening is it created this kind of dual personality for me, where at culinary school we only talked about work, culinary stuff, whatever, or we'd go out for drinks and we would banter about school because that's all on your mind, right? You're just living in it. And then on my days off, I would catch up with some anime or whatever it was. But also during this time, I was trying to get a bit more athletic and a bit more fit. So I still used anime as that inspiration for like becoming one of those characters and learning how to, maybe get better at jujitsu that I was taking, or do stronger lifts, run a 5 mile, without any issue, or whatever it was. And so anime was kind of there for me. But in culinary school, it kind of just fell away, which I won't say I regret, but looking back on it now, I tell people, granted, we're in a very different world, and this is only 15 years ago, that just enjoy what you enjoy. And people who enjoy what you enjoy will find you, because we're all connected now. In 2005, we had like maybe Facebook or
MySpace.
MySpace, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where if you didn't have some like emo band playing on your MySpace page, nobody wanted to talk to you, right? So now it's very different. And that kind of led me into getting a job with a awesome hotel. I worked for the Hyatt for many, many years. And after falling in love with Japanese cuisine in culinary school, that first job at the Hyatt was for a sushi bar. And that's where I really started to understand what the culinary world meant. I paid $50,000 for culinary school to go make $11 an hour working prep, right? That's just what it was. But I loved it. Loved every minute
Were
of it.
you making the sushi yourself, or doing the prep
No,
work?
because so what I was, because this was my first job. I was
Mhm.
21 and I did pantry, which is mostly salads and desserts. And after about 6, 7 months, they started to teach me the fryer. And that means I could fry stuff for the sushi bar, or I could help them with a little bit of prep, getting maybe tempura done for them, whatever it was. Then they taught me the grill, which was responsible for steaks, fish, that kind of thing. And then finally, I learned the wok station. And the wok station was really, really insane because it was just two full burner woks and you're just cranking.
It's like
Uh,
super high heat on those. It's like
yes.
everything
And
is just on high heat.
yeah. And the kitchen itself was maybe a little bit bigger than my office. So everybody's kind of on top of each other. You learn the dance, it was, I love it. I love it so much. But I was there for a couple of years. And after about 2 years, I had come up to my chef and I said, because this is when I started really falling in love with anime again and Japanese food. And I said, Chef, I am giving you my notice. I will be leaving in 3 months and I'm going to Japan. And he's like, what the hell? So it's like, I'm giving you a 3 month heads up. I will train someone for you for 90 days. Just so you know. So left the job, went to Japan for a month, and I was 22 now, or maybe 23. and I just traveled for a month. And that's where I started to see like, oh, anime is kind of part of people's lives. Like it wasn't a really taboo thing. You saw posters and Akihabara, and it was just part of the culture. And so I started to think, why did I hide what I loved when there are people who also enjoy the same things?
Right, because there's nothing
And
nerdy about it there.
right, it's just part of life. There are people who enjoy reality TV and there are people who enjoy anime. It doesn't matter, right? But I went to a place where it wasn't uncommon to see those things, and that was really cool to me. So I got it on in my head to where I'm just going to move out here and work out here, and that was a goal for a long time. And due to some circumstances, that didn't end up happening. And for better, I think, because then I met my wife a year later, so that was cool. Things happen for a reason. But when I came back, I started to really think about, I'm going to embrace the culture of anime a lot. And I still cooked. I worked multiple kitchen jobs, whether or not it was for sushi bars, Irish places, burger joints, whatever it was. I worked for ice cream manufacturers. Like I've made sourdough by hand. I loved learning. And fast forward a couple of years after all of those jobs, I was in a position at a restaurant where there wasn't a lot of room for growth, but I loved working there. So I was starting to get frustrated because I came from a very big hotel where you could climb the corporate ladder. And I didn't enjoy that for many reasons, where money became more important than food, where they're like, hey, we're at 18% food cost, and thank you for making us so much money. How can we reduce costs by 1%? And the answer is always just buy cheaper products. And I wasn't going to go there. So that's when I left stuff like that and moved on to smaller restaurants. During one of those small restaurants, I was getting frustrated with myself and I wanted to be creative. And I actually had a YouTube channel based on making props and a lot of cosplay.
What year was that?
This was in 2019, maybe 2018.
Oh, okay.
And I have a bunch of them laying around the room. I 3D print stuff all the time. I love it. I'm actually working on a costume for a few shows next year because it's a big part of our brand now. And I love that I can do that for work. But when the anime thing came in, I was watching a video by Roberto Blake where he talked about Ikigai, I believe it is. And it's a method of thinking where you bring together the things you're good at, the things you're passionate about, and the things that can make you a living. And then in the middle is that little bit of hope, right?
So that's everybody's dream, right?
Right. And so for me, it was like, well, I'm good at cooking and I love anime. And, there's a market for both, which I'll get to in a minute on the YouTube side. So let me just react to cooking anime. And that's what my channel initially was, where I would just talk about food wars primarily, where the idea was there's a professional chef talking about this anime. And the context was, I'm not just going to sit there and react to it. I'm going to break down everything that they're doing. So it was more of, they're doing this, here's why they did this, or this is why this is wrong. This is why you can't do this in real life.
That's the first autofill suggestion when you type in Chef PK,
right?
Food Wars.
Yeah. And so, I did that for the first 100,000 subscribers, right? And there was a moment in time where I thought I was working full time still and doing videos. And this was February 2020. You know where this is going. It was February 2020. And I thought,
I've heard this story before.
Yeah, I thought, oh, cool. Maybe, I was making some money, 100,000 subscribers. I think in 4 months, I made $4,000, right? People don't realize you don't make a ton off of YouTube unless you're one of the big guys.
Yeah. AdSense alone is kind of crap.
Yeah. So I made $4,000 in 4 months, making 2 to 3 videos a week. And we used that in March to go to Scotland. I was like, cool, let's go do a vlog in Scotland, have some fun, whatever. And we're doing our Scotland thing. We found restaurants and went to all these cool bars and did we walked through very, very old distilleries. I loved the food aspect out there. So much history. And then March like 14th rolls around and they announce like, hey, there's a zombie apocalypse happening and we're shutting down everything.
Wow.
And this is where we're ready to fly home like one day before. And so we, get home, and I call the restaurant owner at the time where I was working with, and he's like, hey, just come in like normal. We'll try to feel it out. We'll see what this means. And then things just happened very rapidly.
Yeah.
After coming back from from Scotland, after coming back, within a week, I lost my job. They basically laid off almost everyone.
Oh, it was devastating for especially restaurant workers and restaurant industry. Yeah.
Yeah. And the only people they kept in this case were the people who worked for the baking side. Cause I was actually the restaurant side of this restaurant. They kept the baking side because there are still grocery stores they fulfilled and stuff like that. I was like, I get it. We don't know what's going on. We'll figure it out. Luckily, my wife was a first responder, so she was always in work. She didn't have to, there was no layoffs there. And when I got home, we kind of saw this coming. Like my wife and I are preparing for it. I had a Patreon going at the time that got me, a couple $100 here and there. And then YouTube was like $1,100 or whatever a month. And I was like, okay, how do we survive? Right. So I sold my car. We used some of that money to like help pay bills. And I started ramping up on YouTube, and then April hit and YouTube was like $200 a month. Nothing, but then Patreon kind of helped a little bit. I stuck with it for probably another 3 months, and then it started to pick up again. I was like, okay, we can be patient here. But I stopped really doing the reaction stuff and started doing more cooking content. And that was because I had thought during a pandemic, people are probably cooking at home, which is a proven case now by a lot of my friends who are cooking creators who started their channels around the same time and now have very far surpassed me. And what I had thought is, well, I've talked about all of this anime food stuff. I may as well make it, right? And that's where the cooking part of it started to come in. Now, I did mention that my friends who started cooking channels have accelerated. Cooking content during YouTube, on YouTube during the pandemic blew up because what's happening? People are at home. People want to cook. People are worried to go out. There's no restaurants open, period, right? I couldn't even find a job if I wanted one. And so you would see this explosion of growth in the food niche. And my channel did not explode because it took two niches and tried to marry them. And to this day, I find myself questioning whether or not that was a good idea. I don't have any regrets because I have what I have now, but I constantly think if I were to maybe separate the two, how much further could the business move forward? But that means leaving one or the other behind, which I'm not willing to do. Either you leave behind food or you leave behind anime. The clear choice is to leave behind anime because the food space to me is very important, but then I'm just a drop in the bucket.
There's a lot of competition in food.
There's a lot of competition, right? Yeah. But I do love fostering a community who hopefully can look to me for questions and answers. Right. Because in the anime community, there aren't a ton of professionals, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not an anime fan first, I think. I'm a chef first. So I have this huge community who loves talking about both. But what I've seen over the years that I am very thankful for is I've literally had people message me and say, Paul, I saw your video on Food Wars and I've always enjoyed cooking, but Food Wars really got me into it. And then I saw your videos and I signed up for culinary school last week. And I'm like, holy crap, you're welcome. And I'm also sorry that you're spending all of that money. Right. But it's moments like those that really kind of keep me going, where you think, okay, you are doing a good thing and you're involving the community in different ways. So after all of these years and this entire journey of culinary school, high school, learning that anime is more important than I thought it was really embracing it. I have a Pikachu tattoo that's dressed as Goku on my wrist, right? Like my arm is all anime tattoos. Like I don't care. It's super fun to me now. But what I have thought from the YouTube side, and for those of you who are probably listening who are interested in YouTube, I have a lot to say about marrying niches. And I kind of want your take on what you think would be the best course of action for maybe someone like me or someone else who's trying to bring two things together that don't always fit.
Well, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think that there's the ultimate thing people are watching YouTube for is to be entertained. And I think you're producing very entertaining videos. Your videos are getting a good amount of views. There's nothing disrespectful about the view counts you're getting. So I think you're hitting the mark very well. I mean, I watch a channel called, I think it's called How to Drink. Or you know him? He
Oh,
makes,
yes. Very familiar.
yeah, he makes drinks based on, I don't know, movies, TV shows, things that he sees, or like fictional drinks he'll bring too. And I don't drink, but I love watching it because he's so engaging and it's so entertaining to just watch him kind of blend these two things together. And so I definitely think that, you either, like you were saying, if you just do a cooking channel, what are you going to have that's going to be different? Because there's a lot of cooks on YouTube, and there's probably a lot of people talking about anime on YouTube. So I think that I wouldn't have any second thoughts about it, really. I would just keep doing it. And I love the fact that you're kind of bringing in the travel to it also. So that's almost like a third element into all of this.
And that's kind of been my goal, is to make it fun and accessible. But the hardest part, honestly, is creating ideas for the show to where I don't saturate my own audience. And we see this a lot on YouTube, where I'm running into the problem now where the content itself becomes the same thing, right? Where you're feeding the audience what it wants, but then the audience does get tired of it. But then creating new ideas does get difficult, especially personally at the scale that I want to do it at. But with the income we have, we can't necessarily do it. So we have to dial it back a bit. So what I have found for my own content, the things I love the most are actually the videos where I involve the community. And those are some of my best performing ones, where I go to a convention and I go talk to cosplayers and I do some trivia and I surprise them with like something from like One Piece, like a devil fruit.
Yeah, those are really fun. Yeah, I saw one where you did the devil fruit. Yeah.
Right. And it's fun for my audience. It's fun for the people I'm interviewing. And it's incredibly fun for me because I get to dress up. I get to surprise people. But it's not really about that. I've been going to conventions since about 2008, probably 2 or 3 per year, sometimes more. I love conventions. And what I've noticed at conventions, especially recently, is that a lot of conventions feel the same, right? You're going to find the same merchandise. Sometimes you'll find the same vendors. You'll find a lot of the samey. So what I am hoping to do, and this is a goal for next year, is provide an experience for attendees they cannot get unless I'm there. And that sounds very selfish in a lot of ways, but like that's what I want. I want to provide this experience that like, oh, this one time I was at a convention and Chef PK came up and asked me some trivia and then gave me a real devil fruit I could eat. They'll probably never have that experience again. Right. Those are the videos I want to create more of. And they're hyper engaging. I love the convention content, and sprinkle those in throughout the year. But those take a ton of effort. To do one of those videos takes us about 2 to 3 weeks, right? Because of all the prep work involved for making the things. In one case, we flew to Anime Expo with a bunch of chocolate. We were at Anime Expo for 3 or 4 days filming and just enjoying ourselves, and then come back and edit. And it's a lot, but those are incredibly fun. So those are the things that like we're trying to introduce more of. How do we involve ourselves with conventions where maybe we can be a featured guest and do a big thing for people, do a demo. This year, last Rose City Comic Con in September, we did a reverse maid cafe where myself and 2 of my very buff bodybuilder friends dressed up in maid outfits. And then my wife and one of her girlfriends, they dressed in butler outfits. and we did a mochi making demo where I was making mochi on
Oh,
stage,
that
literally
sounds good.
with a microwave, just showing people how easy it was. I gave away the microwave. I was like, I don't want this. One of you guys can have it. But I bought a bunch of mochi from Uwajimaya, which is a local grocery store, and we handed them out to everybody in the crowd because I always like to associate memories with food. You're going to remember something more if you're eating, I think, right? Especially an event like that. So you could see people, because it's kind of later in the evening, you see people getting tired of the audience. And I was trying to read the audience in a way, and I brought out my crew earlier than I anticipated. And as soon as they came out, people got excited and like, oh, we're getting mochi. That's so cool. And they start eating it. They get a little sugar rush, whatever the case is. And are they going to ever have that experience again? Probably not, unless they come to one of my panels. And so those are the things we've found to be the most entertaining. So that's how we're starting to really look at marrying content.
Yeah.
Right. You have this IRL aspect, you have the anime side, but you also have the food side.
Now, I kind of like the way you've also brought in, at least I saw your video on you were eating All Might's Impossible Diet.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, you're bringing in kind of some health content in a way. We were talking about your buff friends because obviously you work out a lot. You look like you're in great shape. But how do you wrangle this? If you're eating, that was like a 7,000 calorie day or something like that. And
yeah,
is this something you have to really keep in mind? And are you mindful of your audience just kind of watching that and thinking that maybe that's a good way to be eating?
Yeah, I try to make it very obvious in the videos that I am uncomfortable doing this.
Yeah.
And there was a moment where in that video, we mentioned it in video where we were deadlifting, and it was the second workout of the day. And I literally felt something come up. I was like, nope, no more deadlifts. This is not comfortable. Like if I lift anything else, I will throw up on this floor.
Yeah.
And you don't want to do that. Right. So I try to make it obvious that it's okay to have these things, but you don't want to have them all the time. So
Right.
before this, I'm actually working with a new trainer because I have seasons. Everybody has seasons where I am looking to drop about 12 to 14 pounds, right?
Yeah, I'm cutting right now too.
Yeah, which now that I'm 37 is a little more difficult, but I'm thinking about how to cut. So I'm literally, I was writing down my macros before our meeting, right?
Yeah.
So I could send it to my coach. And what I have looked at is enjoy yourself 80% of the time. I'm sorry. No, the other way. Enjoy yourself 20% of the time. Right. And be good 80% of the time. Otherwise you go crazy. Right. I don't think unless you have balance, you're going to enjoy life. There are some people who are machines and they could just go 100%. I am not a machine. I love having an Oreo every now and then, like it's,
you don't want to be that guy,
No, I mean, it's not fun
because I read Penn Jillette, Penn Jillette, the magician, Penn and Teller. So
yes.
He was really huge, and he went on a very strict diet, actually kind of a vegan diet, and he lost over 100 pounds. But he had something in that book that really resonated. He said that he didn't want to like give up like cake or something like that altogether, but he had this idea of rare and appropriate. So if you're eating those kind of things, it needs to be in a rare and appropriate situation. Like you don't want to be the guy who goes to a birthday party and says, no, I can't have cake because it'll ruin my diet. So it seems to make sense. But if you're just like, shoveling in cake every day, that's certainly not something you need to be. But I think a lot of people tend to think of like the exercising is the main goal of losing weight, but it's not. You just gotta, it's like
20% of the equation.
It's the food. And they always do that on these shows, like The Biggest Loser or whatever. They love showing the exercising. It's like, no, just stop eating many calories. It really comes down to calories in, calories out.
It does. And I actually have a ACE certification in personal training because I left the restaurant industry and I decided to become a personal trainer for like a year and a half, and I hated it. So I went back to the restaurant industry. So I have a lot of background in this. And what I love the rare and appropriate. Like that's such a great way to put it, because we just had our Thanksgiving and we did it like last Sunday or something. And I made a huge feast, giant turkey, all the fixins. People brought stuffing and Jello shots because one of our friends is 25 and she still does that. And, you know, like we had 3 pies. I ate 1 slice of every pie. I had my fill of turkey. I had my potatoes. But the previous day, I had 300 calories less than normal. And the day before that, I had 300 calories less than normal. And then the day after Thanksgiving, I had 300 calories less than normal. So I took out about 1,000 calories from those days and I just added it to Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
So if my normal daily intake to maintain my weight is about 2,700, I could eat close to 3,700 and I won't gain any weight. You just kind of play the numbers. Beard Meats Food has a great video about this because he's a competitive eater, but he's very fit.
Yeah.
Right. He's a very fit guy. He knows that he needs to eat 3,000 calories a day to maintain his weight. So if he's doing an eating video, he'll eat whatever 1,200 or like let's say 2,000 calories every day up to the challenge. That means he has an excess of 6,000 calories he can add to that day. So that means he could eat 9,000 calories in one day and not gain weight. Because your body works in like week cycles, right? Think about how insane that is.
I can't even imagine eating 9,000 calories.
No,
I mean,
I've tried
that would
it.
be hard to
So the
eat
All
that
Might
much
diet
food.
was close to about 6,000 calories for both of us.
Oh, man.
And I was not having it. And to not derail the conversation too much, but when you look at food, you look at the calories in, calories out, right? I think about, okay, if I'm going to go out for a burger, maybe I just won't have, you know, a huge breakfast. Maybe I know I'm going out for dinner. My wife and I were going to a little like arcade bar restaurant thing on Thursday. And so that morning, instead of my normal bigger breakfast, I'll probably cut the calories in half and then have like a protein shake for lunch and then just enjoy myself at dinner.
I mean, that's pretty intuitive. I think that's a good way, but I think it takes a certain amount of experience with yourself, counting calories, counting macros, understanding your own body to kind of do that. I think that at this point, that's kind of what I try to do too, is just kind of manage it that way.
I agree. And what I also think is missed psychologically, and for a lot of people, they may not think about this, but to me, it makes it guilt-free. Right?
Yeah.
Where some people love eating. I love eating. Like I had plenty of food last night, but I eat things I enjoy. Right. But if I know I'm going out, I just account for it. So when I get there, like you said, rare and
appropriate.
What was it? Rare and appropriate.
Yeah.
When I get there, I don't feel bad about it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just like, no, cool. I'm going to In-N-Out. Sweet. I'm just going to skip breakfast. I'll have a black coffee and I'll go eat 2 double doubles and fries.
Do you ever watch, do you ever see Nikocado Avocado?
I have seen that pop up.
Mukbang videos.
Yeah. And I actually, for me personally, like sensory wise, I can't watch them. I don't know
why people like this. This is, I guess, is it, do you say mukbang or is it mukbang?
I think it's mukbang. So mukbang. The origin of mukbang was not actually about eating a ton of food. The origins of it, I believe, were in South Korea, where people were watching other people eat on their cell phones while they had lunch, so they didn't feel as lonely.
Oh my God!
It literally is like a loneliness epidemic, right?
Yeah.
But we kind of twisted it into this: I'm gonna eat this 5,000
well, why do people, I mean, people love to watch this guy, Nikocado Avocado. And he started out, his channel was a vegan channel. And he was this little tiny guy. And then he just went all in on the mukbang. And I think he's like over 400 pounds.
Oh my God.
Probably. I mean, he's massive. And, but people just love to, it's like watching a train wreck or something, just like just
maybe
massive
that's why,
amounts of food.
Maybe people enjoy drama, which, to be honest, that's what people do enjoy. So to me, when I hear about a situation like that versus like Beard Meats Food or Matt Stoney, who are true competitive eaters and they can eat 10,000 calories and they're fine. They're the people. I like watching Beard Meats Food stuff every now and then. You know, he'll try to eat like 3 pancakes, but he's talking about his trip out there and it's just kind of story time. Right. And he's a very endearing person. So I like watching his stuff. Matt Stoney is the same way. He released like his diet. he eats like 1,200 calories a day up until his food eating thing, because he knows. He's like, nope, I still go to the gym. I know how much I need to sustain myself. I get my protein in, blah, blah, blah. So there are, in all fields, there are extremes, food especially. A big one, which I very, very much hate, and I know hate is a strong word and I'm using it, is the food like excess challenges where people are essentially like making giant spaghetti meatballs on a table for like TikTok. They're probably not eating all of that. And it's probably not getting donated in any way. So it means it's being thrown away
It's
for
just
views.
wasteful.
And so when I make a lot of my giant feast videos, like I ate only one piece food for 24 hours. I made probably, God, what did I make? Close to like 17 pounds of meat, right? Whether or not it was beef ribs or brisket or whatever. But I invited friends over. It wasn't just me eating it. We had 5 people eating dinner, whatever it was. And then I got to-go boxes and I packed everything up for them and I gave it to them to like take home. So that way we were only left with a little bit of it. And then we just ate it throughout the week. Right.
Yeah.
Because I come from a place where if you're throwing food away, you're throwing away money.
Right.
And if you're throwing that away in a hotel, it's you on the line. Like, hey, why is your food cost so high? Well, we made too much brisket and we threw away 100 pounds. Then you're fired. So that mentality has carried through with me throughout all of my YouTube journey. I try not to waste anything.
What is it about cooking? What is it that appeals to you so much? Is it the process? Is it the science? Is it the delivery of food to somebody and seeing them enjoy it? Or is
That's
it just
the one?
Oh, it is.
Yep. 100%. I like a lot of people, you like to feel appreciated. And for me, I like doing that through food, where I enjoy seeing someone else really be happy after taking a bite of my meal. And I think anyone can say that, right? Whether or not you're making them a costume or a chair or whatever, you enjoy that. So that's what that is for me. But I like having those experiences, and I feel that's why I really enjoy the videos where I go out to a convention, and I get surprised somebody with something cool. And it's the same thing if you were to just give them something custom,
Yeah, it's different to give somebody something that you made, the food that you made, rather than just, buying them a cheeseburger.
Right. And to be honest, maybe that's your way of giving somebody something though, treating them to a nice dinner or getting them something that you had custom made. I thought of you in this way. That's still really cool. But for me, I putting my skills to the test, so I'm actually firing up a new series, hopefully for the main channel, because I am starting a second channel in January that's very food focused, but where I'm going to be flying out to other creators and I want to make them a full tasting dinner based on their favorite anime, comic, whatever, and do it Hot One style, where I'm just interviewing them while I'm making them dinner.
That'd be fantastic. Yeah.
And to me, it's twofold. I get to talk to them and hang out with them, and I get to make them a meal and just share that experience. Maybe it's something from their childhood. Maybe it's their favorite show that they grew up with, whatever it was, because those elicit feelings that I don't think you could have any other way.
I think food does that. I used to watch a show called Dinner and a Movie, and it was it was one of these where they would show a movie, but they would break into it, and throughout the entire movie they were cooking a meal. It was this couple, and it was just really cute, and it was like I just kind of enjoyed it. It was like you were kind of watching this movie with them in a way, and sharing that experience.
And I think those are where those memories to me are the most important, especially if you can give those memories to someone, because I think right now in the era of social media, we all have very fleeting memories where we'll watch 300 things on TikTok and not remember a single one.
Yeah, that's right.
Just flat out. It is what it is, right? Yeah. You're just infinite scrolling. The apps are designed to do that. I've probably watched whatever, let's say an hour of content a week that I don't remember. Right. But there are people who watch 20 hours that they don't remember.
We all know it's bad for us and we still do it. It's like junk food.
We still do it. Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think 20% of the time that's fine, but I'm conscious, I'm not perfect. I'm consciously making efforts to say, you know what, I'm just going to attempt to set aside every Wednesday night. I read. I don't play a game because I love video games. I won't do anything. I'll just read. It can mostly fantasy. I don't need to read boring fiction, like nonfiction stuff. I don't. It's not for me. But I'll grab a cool fantasy book, even if it's manga or anime or whatever. So I found that as a creator, being able to give someone that they'll remember for their entire life is more important than the shorter, forgettable stuff. And I want to try to create more of that.
Yeah, you can start to build a legacy for yourself.
Mm-hmm. And maybe 10 years down the line, somebody else takes the mantle and they can do the same thing. Maybe I'll hire a sous chef that could eventually like take over and be like, this is your job now.
Well, Paul, I wish you all the success in the coming year. It looks like you've got something coming out in March. I saw on your website. What is this? Is this just do the new series, or is this a book?
So in March, that's the quest for the best book. And it's kind of on the down low because we're actually going to be, these are pre-orders, and I don't like to plug a lot of my stuff during these things. But if you guys want to check it out, it's a guide that we built based on my travels through Japan, featuring all the food that I ate. So it's going to be full recipes, plus the experiences I had, showcasing a lot of those things. So it's more of an adventure than it is just a cookbook, because you're going to get a story behind each recipe and not just a recipe and why it exists. There's a reason for that recipe to exist. And that's what I really wanted to share.
Paul, it was great talking to you. Great seeing you again.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Guys, just one final thought. Go make something for someone you love today.